something that's a bit more today. Birds, bats, not too different from bats.
Winged creatures, yeah.
Bats, winged creatures that maybe created this COVID-19 virus that's going on in the world right now. And I know we spoke about it on the last podcast, but things seem to be changing in the world right now.
Yeah, it really is.
It is on a daily basis. England is just about plateauing, like Will said before the episode started, which is probably a good thing. Well, definitely a good thing. I mean, it'd be better if it was going down. But China have just about opened up Wuhan again. And the doors are open, and shops are reopening, and everything. So their isolation is
I found something
over.
really interesting. For apparently in China, what they're doing is they're still tracking and monitoring where every single person is going to make sure they know who they're interacting with, they know who they're kind of associating themselves with. They have to track all their information through their phones and social networks and everything like that. So they're still, I would say, still under isolation in terms of they're still allowed to go outside and they're still able to be as free as they want to. But you know, I was looking at something earlier, and it was I think it was 7 out of the top 10 countries with the most CCTV camera zones are in China. So, yeah. So the top one, there are, I think it was something like 14 people to every one. In that's the thing. The 2 countries that are outside of it, or the 3 countries are outside of it, are one's London, and the other one is Atlanta in Georgia, USA. In London, there are, I think it's 16 people to every camera, and in China, in the top country in China, there's 6 people to every 1 camera.
That's insane.
Insane. They're estimating by the year 2022 that there's going to be 2 cameras for every 1 person in China.
Jesus Christ. But the thing is, we saw that video where in China, they're not just cameras, they're facial recognition, motion tracking cameras that can recognize you even like if you've got like a scarf on. Like they realize they can track your face, and they can like zoom in properly into like millimeters into your face and track where you are, where you've been in that day, and everything.
And it's
absolutely
all
everything.
associated with the national bank and the national rating system that they've got. I heard things like if you eat food on public transport, your social rating goes down.
Jesus Christ. But there was also that thing where, like that Black Mirror episode where you get judged whether you like took them, like you weren't allowed to use planes, and boats, and go on holiday and stuff if your social record wasn't good enough. Or like if you, like, I don't know, fell asleep in the bus or something, you'd lose points or stuff like that. Like, how crazy is that?
Even other stuff like they track your internet habits, and if you're doing excessive online gaming, it reduces your score. It's a ridiculous thing.
Crazy. Yeah. That is crazy.
Like stuff that's actually almost terrifying in itself.
Life's becoming an episode of Black Mirror.
It literally is. In China, it is. But yeah, we kind of gone off the topic of what coronavirus was, but it's kind of it's a scary concept because we're all talking about what was happening after coronavirus and the after effects of everything that's happening here. I don't know, Will, what's your opinion on it?
Well, the difficulty is we can look at China and say, obviously, they're a lot further along. If you look at it, the most graphs that try and document the cases or the deaths, China is much further along because they had months before it reached the rest of the world. So they're much further along on their graph. But you also have to realize that as an authoritarian regime, they are probably the best, the country that is the best equipped to handle something like this. Like you say, they've got all of this facial recognition technology, and they can properly force people to go into lockdown. Whereas over here, like as much as there is a lockdown on at the minute, like I see, gangs of kids on bikes going past the window, and they don't live in the same household. They're just meeting up with their mates, and I'm sure they are a lot of them are trying to distance themselves from each other. But at the end of the day, there's still lots of people flouting the lockdown rules, whereas in China, that is not the case. If you do that over there, you'd be arrested. The same thing happened in Russia. Like, people are getting 5-year jail sentences for flouting the lockdown. That's just, like, compared to over here, it's ridiculous. So, like, we do not have the mechanisms to enforce a lockdown in the same way.
No, that's totally right. I heard in Russia you're not allowed to leave your house even to do sport or exercise,
Yeah.
and you're not allowed to leave your house further than 100 meters
Wow.
away, and you're encouraged to do like online deliveries for everything. Like you're not even supposed to leave the house to go shopping.
Wow, that's crazy.
Whereas in England, like we said about on the last episode, I've suffered the quarantine in France, which was super strict from the start. And like for weeks and even like today, I've seen stories of people on Instagram who are still meeting up with their mates, like you said, Will, going out for this, like buying beers, going and sitting in parks and stuff. I saw a picture of London Fields that was like this weekend where there was like hundreds of people walking around, like skateboarding or on bikes. And it's just like, whereas in China, yes, it was 6 weeks or 2 months, but in England it will be 6 months if people don't try and stay isolated.
Do you guys think that China was actually completely honest with every bit of information that they tried to give out, or do you think they were hiding the amount of people that died and actually got the infections?
That is definitely
a lot of videos.
Sorry, you go. Sorry.
No, it's just only because I was saying, I've seen videos and evidence of people getting welded into their own houses in China. Just to stop the spread of the disease, welded into their houses. Welded into their houses. That's what I'm saying.
What?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Well, I mean, the thing is, I don't know the hows and whats and whys of what happened in China, right? All I know is that they're not isolating anymore. So they obviously did something right, you know, because all we want all everyone wants at the moment is to be able to go outside and resume normal life, you know. Whereas, I mean, it's crazy to think about literally the whole world's on standby right now. You know, nothing's working. So obviously, everyone wants to be able to return to normal life, but I don't know. I feel like China were the first one, so obviously they probably suffered the most. But America has far surpassed China now in terms of cases and deaths.
I think. Definitely. The thing is with China as well, as much as they are lifting the lockdown, that's in terms of people being able to go outside, but you have to look at also like the kind of businesses that are allowed to open. For example, I think it's movie theaters is the example that I've seen in a lot of news articles. In China, they closed a lot of the movie theaters when the outbreak got bad. And then slowly as the numbers started to come down, they reopened them and then it peaked straight away. So I don't know if it's like a cultural thing, like maybe movie theaters are a big thing in China. So and obviously it's a lot of people in a enclosed environment, so it's easy to spread. But they opened, I think, movie theaters for like one weekend and then boom, the number shot back up again and they've closed them again. So as much as people are out and about, even if that happens here,
like the normal life.
Yeah, exactly. So we might get maybe a month of summer, maybe it might get to like July or August where the lockdown is eased, but pubs aren't going to be open, and movie theaters over here won't be open. All of these kind of still big large.
Looks like I'm out of a job then. But to be fair, like you said, man. China's life is slowly coming back to normal, which is great for them, and congratulations because they've obviously done something right, even if they did do something wrong to begin with. Everyone was eating bat soup, but England and I think all of Europe and especially America, we're not having a summer. Yeah. I know for a fact we're not having a summer, and they're saying 2 weeks at a time. Right? It's already been a month for me here. It'll be 6 weeks. It'll be 8 weeks easily. I reckon in a month's time there'll be even more restrictions. Macron is speaking on the telly Thursday night, so tomorrow night, and I think he's gonna make the thing like 2 more weeks, and I think they'll just do that every 2 weeks.
It's a better way to kind of approach it, isn't it? Where it's kind of just being like, this is where we're seeing it now. This is the approach to doing, because it's gonna give false hope to people. When Donald Trump turned around and was like, "This is gonna be done by Easter." Everyone's going to be like, oh, fuck it, man. It's just going to be light work, whatever's happening. And then when it doesn't happen, it just causes more
But no one wants to say straight away, we're going to be locked down for 3 months, 4 months, even though that's probably the most likely thing that's going to happen.
The thing that I found really interesting, though, was we still don't know the long-term effects of these disorders. The long-term effects of this virus. We've never kind of, in our lifetimes, or never in our parents' lifetimes, seen something so contagious and so easily spread, and how it can almost be no symptoms for certain individuals. There might be something like it could return over a certain period of time. It might be something that stays in your system, something like herpes, where it only comes back every certain amount of time, where we kind of have to sit back and hide back into our homes every couple of years just to kind of go for it.
I
But then
think there is
that
examples
Yeah.
of people who have severe symptoms from this, like severe pneumonia, and actually do have long-term lung damage from this. I think that is something that is being observed in China. I'm not sure how widespread it is, but you've also got to look at
yes,
other factors
I've
like smoking and like
mhm.
and that kind of thing.
Everything, being diabetic,
Hmm.
being hypertension, high blood pressure, all these things are things that elevate your chances of actually getting uh more pain with the disease, really,
Yeah.
more a serious condition that you, if you will. Uh,
How about the people who had SARS in like 2002? Has any of them survived and lived to tell the tale
yeah, I think a
today?
few of them did actually,
Hmm.
because I saw there was a few
So maybe it
older
would be
people.
interesting to look at people who contracted
I think
SARS at the
Hmm.
time to see how they were affected, or like even people who, if people survived from
yeah.
Ebola or things like that, just to see, these new diseases that we're not too used to see the long term effects. Because I've heard multiple people, and I know someone who in France who actually had COVID, and but like very mildly, but now has been struggling to taste and smell. So
Really?
I feel like things like that can be long-term effects of the disease, even though they're like minor, but they're very severe, like in
Hmm.
your
Yeah.
lifetime, and it could even be worse than that. So that those are the sort of things that we don't know yet, that we won't know. And I mean, we can base ourselves off people who've got pneumonia and everything and who've lived with pneumonia, but I think this is very different because this is
Yeah,
so
definitely,
sudden.
And the
definitely.
thing is, pneumonia is just a condition that can occur because it's like almost pooling of secretions within the lungs. It's very different because the disease itself is causing pneumonia, but pneumonia is somewhat easy to treat. It's a fairly simple condition. All you
Yeah,
can really do is give them extra oxygen to be able to help the dissipation of oxygen into the lungs. But there, the disease itself is something that happens, and in reality 99% of diseases or viruses that we get, once we become immune to it, we have antibodies in our system that are able to fight the disorder. But again, it's just something that's so far-fetched. And you were saying, having a look at, I think SARS is a bit more similar, but Ebola is a completely different disease to it. So being able to track the
Yeah,
long-term conditions of those is very, very hard to kind of compare and
yeah.
contrast
it's
how they
hard to
do it.
compare
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know, from a political standpoint. Anyway, I don't know how the government can react to it. Anyway, if this kind of stuff does happen, because it's affected the economy so much anyway that people.
How has it affected the economy so far, and how will it continue to? Do you know?
What from what I've seen for myself, you can just assume it has. If you look at the amount of people that are on furlough, which is people that are getting paid even though they're not doing the jobs they need to because they can't, simply due to the fact that the virus is
Mm-hmm.
occurring. It's affecting. Think about, look, you don't have a job anymore because of what's happening. Everyone around me, the only people that I know that have a job are people that have been working in the industry for a number of years. My dad's been working on National Rail for 20 odd years and been working in his current role for 5 years. So he's got his job and he's still continuing with it because it's something that's necessary. But all essential work just seems to be pushed over to the side, all hospitality work and everything like that. And that generates a lot of revenue for a lot of people. So
Definitely.
I don't know what's happening. Has anyone looked at the kind of legislations that they've put in place to see what's happening about COVID?
Well, I heard you get paid 80% of your wage. I mean, like we spoke about last time, that thing where you get paid 80%
Yeah,
of
yeah,
your
furlough.
wages if you earn less than over less than 2,400, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's what it was. But I was thinking just more in terms of the fact of how they're going to support businesses, because I heard that they
Hmm.
were able to give people £25,000 grants to small or medium sized businesses to kind of help support them in this time, and then they can apply for loans with 0% interest that can kind of help them in the long term. But I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, like it was stuff like when Boris Johnson, and I think we discussed this on the last one as well, when he turned around and said, um, "Oh, I don't want people to go to businesses. We're not going to shut them, but I just don't want people to go to them." There are so many businesses that are kind of almost sitting on a knife edge anyway, living on a week by week basis.
Yeah,
They're turning around and being like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. But we'll just push it off to the side." There must have been a numerous amount of businesses that went under because of that, and that's the government's fault in reality.
you think they should have closed down everything the next day and implemented something where they can still continue to pay them rather than dissuade everyone from going to the
Yeah,
places?
100%.
That only made people suffer from it, of course.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and it didn't help
I mean,
anything, did it? But saying that, in
do you
sorry, I was just
do you think that
no, I was going to say in I think it's Switzerland, or it was one of the Scandinavian countries. It might be Norway or something. They turned around and they were like, they were doing what England have said this whole time, but they were going to do. So they've just been like, no, just try not to go to these places. We're going to keep it all open,
I
but
think
try
it's
not to go to these places.
Sweden that's doing that.
Yeah, in Sweden. There we are. There you go. Have you read about it, Will?
Well, I've seen a lot of people talking about it, but I haven't actually seen like actual.
What's your opinion on the approach of it?
I mean, it's hard to tell at the minute because until we actually, it's the thing is with the virus, it's so hard to look at things in real time and say what's working and what's not because of the way that the virus works. You have a 5-day incubation period where people have no symptoms at all. They think they're fine, but that's when they're most contagious. And so you can like look at it and then you can look at the stats each day coming out. They have the Twitter account that tweets each day. The government, like I think it's the Department of Health or whatever it is, that tweets the numbers every day. That's only so useful because you've got, people by that point, even though that's the number for that day, each person has spread it to a number of other people. And it's kind of like, you have to look at it in like 5-day gaps. So you have to look at it like you would look at the previous 5 days rather than looking at today or waiting for the night time to come and find out what the results were from that day. You have to look at it in terms of like consecutive days and look for trends, look for patterns. And that's why they're looking at now. Why it's plateauing is because it's been about 2 weeks. I'm not sure exactly how long it's been. Has it been about 2 weeks since the lockdown was announced? I
know it's been about. It's been just over a month since the first death occurred.
Yeah.
In the UK, so it's probably been about 3 weeks.
So that's the case. Like the illness tends to last about 2 or 3 weeks. So that's why we're only starting to see it plateau now, even though the lockdown's been in state for like the last 2 or 3 weeks. The numbers kept on going up and up and up, and it's only now, after a few weeks of that we're seeing the results. So it's such a hard. So even if we did look at what's happening in Sweden right now, you can only tell so much by looking at what's happening now. And in 2 weeks' time, then we'll really understand what's happening now. Like in terms of 2 weeks' time in the future, we'll look back and be like, that's when we'll be able to look back at Sweden and be like, okay, comparatively to the UK, for example, they had way more infections or way less or whatever the case may be. So it's really hard to sort of analyze these things in the present, which is what makes it so susceptible to misinformation and all these kind of things, panic on social media. All of this kind of thing it's a real-time situation that's just evolving. As every day there's new news. There's they've just built this massive hospital down in London, the Nightingale thing.
I've seen that.
Now they're saying chances are that place will never be full because they're looking at the way that the virus kind of worsens in severe cases and saying the majority of people who go into it, not the majority, I think it's 50% roughly of people who go into intensive care die anyway. So they want to make,
I didn't hear that stat.
They want to make sure that they're not just putting people on ventilators that are going to die regardless, because then that is using up resources for people that could use that to actually survive, which is such a horrible predicament to be put in as a doctor. I can't imagine what it's like
100%.
to be working in the NHS at a time like this.
Mate, and literally having to turn around and be like, we have to save these ventilators for the younger individuals. Yeah. So if someone that's coming in, where the people that are more susceptible to getting serious conditions from these diseases end up not being able to get the treatment that they need. But it's fortunate to hear from what you said that the Nightingale Hospital is never. Well, the predictions are that it's never going to be full.
Yeah.
But you never know. Even things like the thing that we were talking about before in London Fields, where there was a huge spike of people going out. I don't want to think about how many people probably ended up getting infected simply due to that day alone.
Exactly. There's been so many individual mistakes. I mean, if you look at the Liverpool game, Anfield. How many Spain at that point was already in the middle of an absolute nightmare. That was just as it was starting to get
True.
bad in Spain, and you had what 3,000 Atletico Madrid fans, and Madrid as well, the epicenter of the outbreak in
Yeah.
Spain, coming over here and going to the bars on Merseyside. These places that are the most susceptible to spreading because everyone's having the same glasses. They're not getting washed properly. Everyone's drinking from the same taps. Everyone's touching the same surfaces. Everyone's drunk. Like that. That
And I
will
find
have.
it. I find it. So yeah, no, completely. And it's so weird to look at now, looking back on it, because everyone used to be okay being able to touch bars and when you're going to public places, use the public restrooms and touch the public restrooms, touch the taps, and now it's almost like it's taboo to do
Yeah.
that. It's kind of almost terrifying to look at that, isn't it? Where you're like, I watch videos of like mass gatherings. I saw a video that one of my friends had when he went to Mecca, and everyone was walking around, and I was like almost gobsmacked about the sheer amount of people that were there, and thinking how quickly, if COVID was there at that time, how quickly it would spread. It's a very weird
Yeah,
time
it's
that we're
crazy.
in.
Like masses, for example, like church gatherings. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
All these things are just completely on hold. Like there's been nothing like this, and people keep
Mate,
comparing
every
it to the
time that they
Blitz,
fucking
and it's like the Blitz was
yeah
different because you know it was a case of you had to turn off all your lights at nighttime and that kind of thing, and that was different.
mhm.
It's like a virus. As much as we need to have that spirit of togetherness, I understand that that's the main kind of reason why people are making these comparisons to like the wartime period, but
But
it's so
we are at
different. It's
war, are
about
we not?
individual actions. It's about not going out unless you absolutely have to. It's not about just
Mhm.
manning up and persevering and all this kind of nonsense. It's just it's
That,
such a scary
that's the thing that I'm
situation.
thinking of. Yeah, completely. Like if you just think about it in terms of when this is all said and done, and we look back onto it, how do you want to remember yourself in this time? Would you want to look at yourself and be like, "Oh, look, I was just out with my mates getting fucking pissed, having a good time, we're going to the parks," or I was like, "No, I did what I had to do. I had to do my part and stay inside and help people that I needed to go
Exactly.
around and
Yeah,
deliver food to these people or wherever it is." And it's just selfishness at the end of the day, isn't it?
it definitely is.
A couple of my mates are like that, and we're all kind of. It's almost got to a joke now where it's just like, "Oh, look at you, you fucking spreader, you fucking
Mm-hmm.
Captain Spreader over here, fucking spreading over to everyone and shit like that."
It's true. You have to
Which is
say
it's
these
funny in
things, like as
itself.
much as it's, and especially it's painful when it's your friends. Like I don't want to dob my own little
Yeah,
brother in, but a few weeks ago, I was. This is before the lockdown, so it's not like he was breaking the law or anything like that. But
he wasn't a
he,
spreader.
he was, he was, socializing with his friends just before things started to get really bad, and I was like, "Can you not see that this is exactly what you need to not be doing?" And at the time, he was like, "Oh, you're being pedantic," sort of belittling what I was saying. But now, I think anyone it's completely changed. Like you have to look ahead for these things and try and anticipate. Like I knew that it was going to come to a point where you just literally could not have any contact with people that weren't in the same household, because for
Yeah,
every one, I think it's like every one person who gets it, the cumulative effect of spreading, I think the average is what every person who gets it on average spreads it to it's either 8 or like 16. I can't remember the exact number, but it's a lot of people. And the cumulative effect of that is
yeah,
you
numerous
spread it.
numerous
By
amounts
the
of
time that
people
it's
to go
finished
to. Yeah,
spreading from you, it's 50,000 people. One person can
ridiculous.
spread it to 50,000 people cumulatively over time just by going about doing their business, because each person
Because that's
spreads
one
it.
person going to
Yeah,
another person that passes it on, and it's
exactly.
like one
And if
person
each
passes it to
person
five
infects
people,
like
and those 5 people
eight people,
pass to five. Yeah, yeah.
it's a ridiculous amount of cases.
Mate, and that's what it was. I remember when I was working in the hospitals, and the physios were turning around being like, "Oh, people are making too much of a deal out of this. Almost, people were almost in disbelief about the effect that it could have."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anyone really expected to be in the position that they were, especially not the healthcare
Yeah,
workers.
definitely not.
That obviously they'll put in the worst case scenario in their heads, but I was with healthcare workers, and they didn't think it was going to be as bad as it is. It's I do pray for them. I do
Honestly,
really, really pray for them, and just hope for the best. And the unsung soldiers, people that are working in shops, people that are delivering things to people's houses, like literally fucking
I mean, you look at
It takes a lot of balls to
the
be able to go
case
and do
of
that.
our new immigration system that Boris Johnson was going selling the praises of in January. This kind of point-based system that we're taking from Australia. You know, all of these workers that we now deem as essential. You know, you've got people who work in supermarkets, you've got people who are cleaning, people who are you know doing infrastructure, people who all of these vital services. All of those professions are deemed low-skilled jobs under that system.
Mate,
And now they are
fucking
essential.
nurses.
Like
Nurses, yeah, no, that's what it is, and it's any job that's under £25,000 a year or something like that,
Yeah.
isn't it? And the starting salary for nurses is 24.2 grand.
they're not the people on furlough. It's the bankers that are on furlough.
Exactly.
It's you know
That are sitting back and fucking getting paid whatever they fucking
exactly.
need to, man. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. And the thing is, you only realise it in times of crisis. I hope and I pray. I don't wish any bad to Boris Johnson. I really, really don't. Honestly, I wish him a speedy recovery and just he's a
Likewise,
father.
likewise.
He's yeah, literally anyone that wishes death on anyone has to be sick in some sort of way anyway, especially someone that they don't know, let alone the prime minister who's trying to support the country at this time. As good of a job is arguable, but it doesn't matter. But it's like I hope he just comes out of the ICU and realizes how essential and how much these nurses and these doctors and these healthcare professionals are helping him out in this time. And they're giving up all their time, resources, their own safety, their own lives almost, just to be able to protect themselves against themselves. Really, it's a heroic act that few people would actually wish upon.
If you look at
their worst enemy.
You know, nurses, for example, you've had there's quite a lot of cases in this country of young nurses dying from the virus, and that's not supposed to. You know, everyone's like, oh, it's only supposed to be the old people that are getting it, and the reason for that is you get something called viral overload, which is where repeated exposure to the virus makes it more likely that you're going to get severe symptoms. So a nurse who's going and treating 100 people in a day, even though they would normally be fit enough to survive the virus easily and maybe even be asymptomatic, because they're just getting it over and over and over again. And this comes down to a lack of personal protective equipment, which is an absolute shambles for, you know, the fifth richest country in the world, and even at this stage where we're not overrun, you know, it's going to get worse. And we're already having shortages of gloves and masks and stuff. And like, I remember I saw a news report the other day that was about, it's ridiculous the level of personal protective equipment in some of these places is like literally like a plastic apron and a mask and some gloves. That's it. And it can enter it can go through your ears, it can go through your eyes, it can go even if it's just on one tiny bit of your body, like you need full body protective equipment to be safe from this virus, and there's just a complete lack of that. And we are supposed to be a developed country. Like,